Is it important if our rights are guaranteed to us by the government or by a power higher than a political entity? We'll find out next on Significant Insights. Hello and welcome to the program. As usual, very good to have you with us. In his inaugural address, President Kennedy echoed the ideals and beliefs of our country's founders, and for that matter, of our Constitution, when he said, "The rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God." If you're a Christian, this rings true. But there are some people in the country that simply don't believe in God at all. So, should it matter to them if our country operates as though we were under God? William Federer, my guest today, says it should matter to everyone, regardless of their beliefs. He's a nationally known speaker, best-selling author, and he's the president of Amerisearch, a publishing company dedicated to researching America's heritage. Bill's American Minute radio feature is broadcast daily across the country and the internet. Our conversation today centers around the book, 3 Secular Reasons Why America Should Be Under God. A very interesting book. And you talk about atheism, which today is on the forefront. You have more pressure from atheists in America today, trying to really cause us to abandon even more the whole concept of God. Aren't the atheists a minority, a significant minority? How many atheists are there in America?
Probably around 1 to 2%. The Pew Religious Landscape Survey in 2010 said that 78% of Americans identify themselves as Christian. About 26% Catholic, 16% Baptist, Lutheran, Methodist, and so forth. So the largest percentage is Christian in America. And now worldwide, Christianity is the largest religion. 33% of the world identifies itself as Christian. Second largest religion is Islam, 22%.
So what we're talking about is a general, at least at this time in history, a general belief in God.
Well, you're right. And even the Harris poll, Gallup poll, and Fox News poll had numbers from 90 to 94% of the people in the country believe in God. From debating atheists, I asked the question, do you like having rights the government cannot take away? Well, yeah, everyone likes having rights the government cannot take away. Well, then that means those rights need to come to you from a power higher than the government. That's why the founders said all men are endowed by their creator. Even John F. Kennedy in his inaugural address said the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. Well, if there is no God, where do the rights come from? The generosity of the state. And what the state giveth, the state can taketh awayeth. And so we see that when the founders said all men are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that was the most radical political statement in world history. One of the books I wrote called Change to Change, it's the 6,000-year quest for global power. I go back to the beginning of recorded human history, around 4000 BC, Sumerian cuneiform on clay tablets in the Mesopotamian Valley. And so 4000 BC, when writing was invented, to around 2080, the 6,000 years of world history, the most common form of government is what? It's kings. Now they go by different names: Pharaoh, Caesar, Kaiser, Sultan, Tsar, Maharaja, Genghis Khan, Julius Caesar, Attila the Hun. The name changes, but the function remains the same. Power wants to gravitate into the hands of one person. And of course, I believe it goes back to the fall in the garden and Cain killing Abel. And so you put some babies in a playpen, one of them will take the rattle from the others. And you put some kids on a playground, one of them is the bully hogging the ball. Put some people in the woods, one of them is the Indian chief, and put them in an inner city, one of them is the gang leader. So it's sort of the Lord of the Rings. Everyone wants this ring of power. And if you are friends with the king, you are more equal. And if you are not friends with the king, you are less equal. And if you're an enemy of the king, you're dead. It's called treason. So for most of world history, equality was how close of an orbit can you get to the king. So over years, these empires get bigger and bigger and bigger. Julius Caesar, the Byzantine emperors, the Muslim sultans, the king of Spain, France, and Austria, but the most powerful king in world history was the King of England. 13 million square miles and 500 million people. All of India, a quarter of the world's population right there. And America, our founders are going to break away from this king and we have no army and no navy? just a bunch of courageous people with faith. And so our founders wanted to run as far away from a king as they could. And so they took the power of a king, broke it into 3 branches. And so, in a sense, all our Constitution is a bunch of hurdles to prevent the rubber band from snapping back into the hands of a king. So it's a spectrum of power. One side's total government, the other side's no government. Total government, you get a king, a pharaoh. No government's anarchy, unless the people have internal morals. And that goes back to Israel. Now, Israel was the first nation that we have record of that ruled itself without a king. Those first 400 years when they came out of Egypt and went into the Promised Land, in Egypt, the Pharaoh controlled everything. Well, in Israel, the law said there's no respect of persons in judgment. Rich or poor, everyone's the same, male and female, made in the image of the Creator. Lo and behold, this is the beginning of the concept of equality on planet Earth. You mean everybody I see is equal to me? There's no royal family to butter up next to? No. And so in Israel, they had no prison system because the law said swift justice at the gates and then a city of refuge you can run away to. The law said everyone has to leave the gleanings in the field for the poor people to pick through. So they had their own welfare system, right? And then Israel was the first nation with private land ownership. All those boring chapters where they did surveys and lots and divided up the land, where in Egypt the Pharaoh controlled it. And so Israel's system worked as long as the priests taught it. As long as the priests taught the law, then the people had these internal morals and they could have this society that had lots of freedom. When the priests stopped teaching the law and every man did what was right in their own eyes, then you began to have chaos and sodomites banging on doors and concubines being raped and chopped up and sent to the 12 tribes. And Eli, the high priest, had his own son sleeping with women in the tabernacle. And the whole thing starts to crumble. And they all go to Samuel the prophet and they say, we want to be like all the other countries. We want a king.
Saul.
Yeah, and they got King Saul. And Samuel cries, and the Lord said, they did not reject you. They rejected me. So God's perfect plan was to take the power, stretch it, put the power in the hands of the people. But if the people don't have morals, it's going to turn into chaos. So they need these laws. But if you think a little deeper, it's not just laws, it's laws with a God on top who's watching and knows every thought and wants you to be fair and is going to hold you accountable in the next life.
And of course, believing that a higher power sees what we do naturally leads to having what we know of and call a conscience. More with Bill Federer right after this.
Well, Harry S. Truman, our president in 1949, said, we believe all men are created equal because we are created in the image of God. Question, what belief system believes you're made in the image of God? Jews and Christians, book of Genesis, in the image of God he created male and female. In Islam, Muhammad said Allah has no image. In Hinduism, there's 300 million different gods, and then in atheism, there is no God. So the fundamental idea of equality, you trace that back to the Bible.
Welcome back. Today I'm talking with writer and speaker Bill Federer about his book, 3 Secular Reasons Why America Should Be Under God. As we continue, we talk about the God of the Bible versus gods of other faiths. When our founding fathers established the Constitution, all of them weren't Christian. And yet they saw a need for some absolutes. They saw a need for structure. They saw a need for boundaries. And they found that in the Bible.
Right. The concept of everyone being equal, when the Declaration says all men are created equal, that comes from the book of Genesis. In Islam, Allah has no image. You can't be made in his image. In Hinduism, there's 300 million different gods, so which one are you in the image of? And in atheism, there is no God. And so our founder said, no, we have rights from a creator, and therefore the king is infringing on our God-given rights, and we can rebel against the king. The old paradigm was the divine right of kings, that God picked someone to be his king, and that person is God's dispenser of rights and power. He's the political intermediary between you and heaven. And when the New Testament, Protestant Reformation, Christianity comes along and says, wait a second, everybody gets their own relationship with God. We don't need this political intermediary between us and God. And so it pulls the rug out from underneath the kings. And so in America, the people are the king. The politicians are our servants. And that was the dynamic. Unfortunately, after every crisis, there's a gradual reconcentrating of power.
When did we start in the United States moving away from that understanding of the boundaries and a higher power that gave us rules?
Well, it was warned in Washington's farewell address. He said, usurpation, which is doing something you're not authorized to do, but you get away with it. Usurpation, though in one instance is the instrument of good, it is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. So the worst thing you can have is a leader that says, I want to do something good, but you got to give me more power to do it. And so it was good that Lincoln ended slavery. But in the process, a lot of rights went from the states to the federal government. It was good that Woodrow Wilson wanted to get us through World War I, but he concentrates power with, the federal income tax and the 17th Amendment.
Same thing with Roosevelt?
Roosevelt's the ideal example. Here, he wants to get rid of poverty during the Great Depression, and so he says, okay, we have to do all these New Deal programs and concentrate power. And Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty, and Nixon's war on drugs, and Bush's war on terror. And now the new president, no matter what the crisis is, the answer is the same. Let the president take more power so that he can do something good with it. The problem is you're moving away from the people determining their fate to now you're into the hands of one person.
Let's go back to your book, The 3 Secular Reasons Why America Should Be Under God. With all of this said, what are those 3 secular reasons?
Well, the first is, do you like having rights the government cannot take away?
Yep.
Yes, then those rights need to come to you from a power higher than the government. That's why John F. Kennedy said the rights of man come not
Yep.
from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. The second question is, do you like being equal? Yeah, I like being equal. Where did equality come from? Didn't come from Islam, where infidels are not equal to Muslims. Women are not equal to men. In Islam, man can have 4 wives, a woman cannot have 4 husbands. It takes 2 women to testify in court against 1 man. A man can beat his wife, the woman can't beat the husband. There's not equality. And then in India, they have the caste system for thousands of years, and it's hierarchical. And so if you happen to be born in the lowest caste, the untouchables, the Dalits, you have to take care of the garbage and clean the toilets, and no matter how good of a job you do, you can never graduate and
No matter how
Brahmin.
intelligent you are, no matter, it's a locked system.
Right, there's no upward mobility. And then in the communist countries like North Korea, right, in those countries your worth is dependent on your utility. Right? If you're useful to the state, you are worth more. If you are not useful to the state, you're voted off the island, the survivor program. Well, Harry S. Truman, our president in 1949, said, we believe all men are created equal because we are created in the image of God. Question, what belief system believes you're made in the image of God? Jews and Christians, book of Genesis, in the image of God he created male and female. In Islam, Muhammad said Allah has no image. In Hinduism, there's 300 million different gods, and then in atheism, there is no God. So the fundamental idea of equality, you trace that back to the Bible.
And Christian Judeo principles.
Judeo-Christian principles. I mean, the French Revolution says, well, everybody's equal because as long as the society says so, right? And well, wait, what if, and then Hitler and the Nazis, well, our society says everybody's not equal. So, we're just following the laws of our society. It's like, no, there has to be a standard of equality higher than society. And Harry S. Truman said, well, we're all made in the image of the Creator. Well, and the third reason is, do you like a country with a lot of laws or few laws? Everybody likes few laws. Well, for there to be order in society with few external laws, the populace needs more internal laws. And that's where John Adams said, our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate for the government of any other. In other words, it's like a parent that gives the teenager the car keys and says, you can come home whenever because I know you're going to do what's right. But if you don't do what's right, you're going to be pulled over by the police and controlled behind bars. So, teenager, you are going to be controlled either voluntarily from the inside or forcibly from the outside. And it's the same way with a nation. We're either going to be voluntarily controlled with internal morals and laws, or we're going to teach the kids to give in to their passions and lusts and 50 Shades or whatever and do whatever you want. And there's going to be chaos and all kinds of confusion and rioting and killing. And then the people are going to say, government, step in and restore order. And when the government does, power is going to concentrate, and then you're back to a dictator, back to a king.
Can a democracy survive without strong moral principles and ethical principles?
Absolutely not. Even Plato in 380 BC in his book Republic says democracy is the most charming form of government. Everybody learns how to tolerate everybody, and then they tolerate people that are a little off, and then they tolerate people that are a little bit more off, until finally they're tolerating open convicts and criminals, and there's crime. And then he says that the manner of Democrats, and that's Plato's word because he's describing democracy, he says the manner of Democrats is everyone does what is right in their own eyes. And the young man gives into libertinism and useless and unnecessary pleasures, even incest and unnatural union. And he throws off all shame, and then it begins to turn into the social chaos. And then they discover the pot of city treasury money sitting there. They go, hey, let's vote to spread the wealth around. Now there's no money left. And then they say, well, where can we get more money? Let's vote to take it from the rich people. Now there's no rich people left. And then it turns into this tug of war where they're beginning to bicker and fight, and they begin to say, can't someone come along and fix this mess? And then somebody comes along, they're all smiles, they promise everything to everybody, and this person begins to consolidate power. And when he starts to get too powerful, they cast it in his teeth. He has the choice of giving up power or getting rid of the people confronting him. He decides to use the power of government to target his noisy political opponent, has them falsely accused, drug away. Finally, he stands in the chariot of state, holding the reins of power, and he is revealed as the tyrant. So 380 BC, Plato says that democracy will only last as long as the people have virtue. Sort of like Israel, right? As long as the priest taught the law, it worked. But when they give up teaching the law and every man does what is right in their own eyes, and people give in to their passions and lusts, smash windows, set things on fire, and then people say, government, step in with militarized police like Ferguson, Missouri, and restore order. And then, yeah, they do. But by the time the dust settles, you've transitioned away from the people ruling to now you're back to control by ultimately one person.
Warnings to pay attention to from William Federer. You can get your copy of 3 Secular Reasons Why America Should Be Under God at AmericanMinute.com. When we return, thoughts on the 10 Commandments and how they apply to us today.
The 10 Commandments are predicated on the belief that they were given by an authority higher than any man, any king, or any government. That's why the sentence preceding the 10 Commandments asserts the following: God spoke all these words.
Welcome back. William Federer laid out 3 excellent reasons why having a government under God of the Bible has really been instrumental in the success of our system of democracy. When we follow God's laws, there's order and peace. Writer and talk show host Dennis Prager talks more about the connection between the Bible and civil obedience in today's Final Thoughts.
No document in world history so changed the world for the better as did the 10 Commandments. Western civilization, the civilization that developed universal human rights, created women's equality, ended slavery, created parliamentary democracy, among other unique achievements, would not have developed without them. As you will see when each of the 10 Commandments is explained, these commandments are as relevant today as when they were given over 3,000 years ago. In fact, they're so relevant that the 10 Commandments are all that is necessary to make a good world, a world free of tyranny and cruelty. Imagine for a moment a world in which there was no murder or theft. In such a world, there would be no need for armies or police or weapons. Men and women and children could walk anywhere at any time of day or night without any fear of being killed or robbed. Imagine further a world in which no one coveted what belonged to their neighbor, a world in which children honored their mother and father and the family unit thrived. A world in which people obeyed the injunction not to lie. The recipe for a good world is all there in these 10 sublime commandments. But there is a catch. The 10 Commandments are predicated on the belief that they were given by an authority higher than any man, any king, or any government. That's why the sentence preceding the 10 Commandments asserts the following: God spoke all these words. You see, if the 10 Commandments, as great as they are, were given by any human authority, then any person could say, who is this man Moses? Who is this king or queen? Who is this government to tell me how I should behave? Okay, so why is God indispensable to the Ten Commandments? Because, to put it as directly as possible, if it isn't God who declares murder wrong, murder isn't wrong. Yes, this strikes many people today as incomprehensible, even absurd. Many of you are thinking, is this guy saying you can't be a good person if you don't believe in God? Let me respond as clearly as possible. I am not saying that. Of course there are good people who don't believe in God, just as there are bad people who do. And many of you are also thinking, I believe murder is wrong. I don't need God to tell me. Now, that response is only half true. I have no doubt that if you're an atheist and you say that you believe murder is wrong, you believe murder is wrong. But forgive me, you do need God to tell you. We all need God to tell us. You see, even if you figured out murder is wrong on your own, without God and the Ten Commandments, how do you know it's wrong? Not believe it's wrong, I mean know it's wrong. The fact is, you can't, because without God, right and wrong are just personal beliefs, personal opinions. I think shoplifting is okay, you don't. Unless there is a God, all morality is just opinion and belief. And virtually every atheist philosopher has acknowledged this. Another problem with the view that you don't need God to believe that murder is wrong is a lot of people haven't shared your view. And you don't have to go back very far in history to prove this. In the 20th century, millions of people in communist societies and under Nazism killed about 100 million people. And that doesn't count a single soldier killed in war. So don't get too confident about people's ability to figure out right from wrong without a higher authority. It's all too easy to be swayed by a government or a demagogue or an ideology, or to rationalize that the wrong you're doing isn't really wrong. And even if you do figure out what is right and wrong, God is still necessary. People who know the difference between right and wrong do the wrong thing all the time. You know why? Because they can. They can because they think no one is watching. But if you recognize that God is the source of moral law, you believe that He is always watching. So even if you're an atheist, you would want people to live by the moral laws of the Ten Commandments. And even an atheist has to admit that the more people who believe God gave them, and therefore they are not just opinion, the better the world would be. In 3,000 years, no one has ever come up with a better system than the God-based Ten Commandments for making a better world, and no one ever will. I'm Dennis Prager.
I really like what William Federer was saying about it's important that our country is under God, and also that Dennis Prager alluded to, because from the very founding of our nation, those biblical Judeo-Christian principles were important not only to our foundation, but that guided us and gave us certain boundaries that has led this country into the greatness that we have achieved. And without those, we'll lose that. We lose our moral compass, because within the Christian Judeo principles and values, there are moral boundaries. Now, we may not have always have kept those, but that's been the standard. That's been the standard that we've had in this country, and it's been absolutely essential to our success. And the more we get away from those, and the more that character, and the more that the ethical and moral values that have always been important to us, as we abandon those, democracy cannot survive under that. And so I think we have to face the fact that we do need a nation under God. Thanks for joining me. God bless you. We'll see you next time.